And I'm not, I think I like this universe. Okay. I'm not sure I want to try and start a new one. So here's where we left off. Dr. Lehman's video sort of framed what we're going to be doing today, but since that was a week ago, let me just review what you should know ahead of the texts that we're going to look at. The texts have to do with a ritual that dealt with the cup of blessing that, over Birkat Hamazon, over the prayer said after eating, there was a cup of blessing that was passed around to certain people, right? Now, this is a ritual that is no longer performed. Like many different rituals in Jewish history, it just sort of fell out of favor, but it had meaning for its time. The particular people that are involved in this story, there are three folks who are going to be introduced to you here. One of them is a rabbi by the name of Ulla, U-L-L-A. Okay? Ulla lived in the land of Israel, was a very prominent leader among the rabbinic contingent there. Because the land of Israel, even if you didn't live there, the land of Israel had special status. So when he travels to Babylonia, which is also a major Jewish center in that time, he has status there too. Okay? This is, somewhere 3rd, 4th century. Not exactly sure. The other rabbi in the story is Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman is one of the most prominent rabbis in Babylonia. And so when they get together, interesting things might happen. So there's going to be a meal where the two of them and some other people are together. The third person who is significant in this story is a woman by the name of Yalta. Not to be confused with Yenta. Yalta, right? Yalta is sometimes identified as the wife of Rav Nachman. We're not absolutely sure about that. It's possible that her father was the lay leader of the Babylonian Jewish community, and that therefore she had particular status because of that. And although we don't have a lot of information about her from other sources, what we do know seems to indicate that she had a very strong personality. You'll see in this text just exactly how feisty she could be. Okay? So without further ado, let's go to the first text, and here we are. All of the it's just broken up into different segments, but all of these texts are from one unit in the Babylonian Talmud in Masechet Brachot. So here's the beginning of the unit. Rabbi Yochanan said, anyone who blesses over a full cup, this is the ritual of the cup of blessing, is given boundless inheritance. As it is said, and this is the blessing Moses gave to the Israelites at the end of his life, and full of the Lord's blessing take possession on the west and south. In other words, if your cup is full of wine, you will inherit from all sides of Israel. Rabbi Yossi Bar Hanina adds to this. He says that such a person who blesses over the full cup merits and inherits two worlds, this world and the world to come. Okay, so that's the start. Any questions up to here? Yes, Lou.
Why just south and west? Why not north and east?
Not sure, but I'll take a stab at that. Invaders come to the land of Israel from the north and the east, especially the north. Right? That's my presumption. Okay. Other questions? Everybody ready to go on?
It just sounds like a stretch that just by drinking wine you can inherit, get great benefit just from drinking wine.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would dispute you about that, Steve, but I mean,
that's all you had to do. It's like no matter what else you do, you've already achieved boundless inheritance.
Well, so, certain rituals are not just rituals that we perform because they have a certain meaning to us. We also perform them because they have actual power. At least, that's the more mystical view of Jewish ritual. Right? In other words, you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for God. Right? And by doing it, you bring down some of the power to yourself. At least now this may be one of the reasons why the ritual fell out of favor, because as more rationalist approaches to Judaism became prevalent, certain rituals just didn't seem to match that very well. This is a ritual that they believed had certain power. Okay. Other comments or questions before we go on? All right, let's take a look at the second piece of this. So, we've sort of established that the cup of blessing, people come together and eat, and to finish that over a cup of blessing is, sort of represents the fact that they're coming together to eat is a holy act. And this just tends to underscore that. Rabbi Zera said in the name of Rabbi Abahu, and some say this was taught in a Braita, in a separate teaching, an earlier teaching, 10 things were said regarding the cup of blessing. Right? It requires washing and rinsing. It must be undiluted wine. The cup must be full. It requires crowning and covering. One takes the cup with both hands and then places it in his right hand. He raises it a tefach, a handbreadth above the ground, and he concentrates his eyes on it. And some say he also sends it as a gift to his household. Okay, so the cup, again, has a certain power. It conveys reward. It conveys some kind of blessing. and maybe many kinds of blessing. Blessing to the one who lifts it, blessing to the one who drinks from it. And so, if he sends it as a gift to his household, what is he doing? If he gives the wine, which has this, presumably has this power to convey blessing, what's he doing by giving it to his household?
Spreading the blessing.
See, it's extending the blessing to all of them too, right? Okay, so again, there's not a lot more to say about this. Is everybody clear about where we are? Any questions? Well, let's continue. All right. So, some say he also sends it as a gift to his household so that his wife will be blessed. Part of the idea being conveyed here is that, his wife is representative of his household, right? Of course, the wife, the children in ancient society, the wife and the children belong to the man, right? They're not independent entities, right? But to extend blessing to them, he sends the cup to them. So here we come to the incident that is the guts of this Talmudic passage. Ulla visited the house of Rav Nachman. So Ulla is traveling from the land of Israel and comes to the house of his fellow sage Rav Nachman. He ate bread and recited Birkat HaMazon, right? That's, what the rabbis do, right? So, and he then passed the cup of blessing to Rav Nachman, right? It's like, I think it's just a courtesy, right, to his host, right? Ulla is the one who is favored with being able to lead the Birkat HaMazon and to hold the cup of blessing and to drink from the cup of blessing, and he passes it over to his colleague. Rav Nachman said to him, "Let the master send the cup of blessing to Yalta." Right? What's the question that's raised here? Why does Rav Nachman even have to suggest this? Why doesn't he simply pass it on to her himself, particularly if she's his wife? Right? Yes, Liz.
Wouldn't that indicate that maybe she's got not a higher place, but he's actually showing more respect that she's a person, an individual? And if that's not common, if that's not how things were done, that would have been shocking.
Yeah, well, here we are with the question, right? I don't know if it's shocking, but it's at least questioned. Rav Nachman asks Ulla to do this. Why? Because maybe Ulla doesn't like the idea. Maybe Ulla won't want Rav Nachman's wife or this woman who's a prominent person in the community to drink from the cup of blessing. Right? Yes, Daniel.
When I read it, I don't read a lot into it. I mean, one guy is saying, okay, you've honored me with Birkat HaMazon. Now I'm going to be honored with wine, but I want you to do that. And then the other guy says, no, you do it. It's kind of like that old I forget what 1930s comedy it was, but you go first. No, you go first. No, you go first.
Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, maybe. But it's
Yeah.
it's just, who's going to give? They're both being honorific to the other, and that's it.
Until Rav Nachman says, let the master give it to Yalta also. Gordon?
It could be that Rav Yachman was terrified of Yalta and didn't want to offer it himself. He wanted someone else to offer it to her.
Possible. And when we see the continuation of this story, you will understand exactly why that might be.
I read it.
Yeah, you cheated ahead, Gordon. That's all right. You're allowed. Right? Maybe. Or maybe Rav Nachman is just paying a courtesy to her. Or maybe Rav Nachman is asking a serious question of Ula. Maybe he's asking, is it permitted to pass this on to a woman? Right? So maybe the underlying question is, who gets the cup of blessing and why? Right? So Rav Nachman frames it as a question, throws it out to Ula. Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay. So let's go back to the text and let's see.
Rabbi, can I make a
Yes.
comment? I guess what's going through my head is what you said at the end there, like, how do we decide who gets this blessing? It kind of reminds me of the vaccine, like, the doctor that had the extra vials and took it home because he was gonna have to throw it away. And, like, how do we decide who gets it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So here we have a cup of blessing, which presumably might vaccinate in some special way. After all, it is a cup of blessing. It has a certain power associated with it. So who decides who gets the cup of blessing? What are the rules? So maybe Rav Nachman is asking Ula, what are the rules by you? Who gets it?
And is it just our family? Like,
and if it's our family, is it the whole family?
right.
Right? Maybe it's enough for the whole family for the man to have the blessing, and therefore it is, passed on to them through him. Or maybe it needs to be shared with other members of the family. And, there's a lot that is unsaid here. Okay? So, number 4. Ula replies to Rav Nachman. He says, we don't really need to pass the cup of blessing to her. Why? Because Rabbi Yochanan taught the fruit of a woman's belly is only blessed through the fruit of a man's belly. And he quotes a verse which says, Uveirach peri vitnecha. God will bless the fruit of your male belly. Right? It doesn't say the fruit of her belly, but rather the fruit of your male belly. Okay? So Ula has this, you might think it's a little convoluted, but grammatically it is not inherently unreasonable. His interpretation of a verse suggests that blessings come from the man to the woman and not independently to the woman.
That strikes me as an amazingly sexist thing to say.
I'm not arguing that point, Daniel. Right? I'll only say what I said before. From a strictly grammatical point of view, in terms of how you interpret this verse, it's not inherently unreasonable. It's just remarkably sexist from our point of view. Okay? Everybody ready to go forward? Okay. Similarly, we have a teaching from, it says in the translation Rabbi Natan, but the text says Rabbi Yochanan. Okay? From where, from what verse do we learn that the fruits of a woman's belly are only blessed through the fruits of the man's belly? And he quotes the same verse and the same interpretation. Doesn't say the fruit of her belly, but rather the fruit of your male belly. Right?
Why is there a need for the rabbis to repeat what was just taught? I mean, if he's not reinterpreting it or changing it.
It's not that there's a need to, but frequently in the Talmud, when you have another source for the same teaching, it is cited because that lends support to the validity of the original teaching.
I thought he was repeating the same Deuteronomy 7:13 here, though.
He is.
Okay, I guess I'm not really following.
But it was, so the first time it is Ula who cites this teaching. The second time it is said, this is actually a braita. The phrase in Hebrew, Tanya Nami Hachi, means it was also taught in a braita. In other words, this was something that Ula himself didn't just hear, but others heard it as well, and it was codified. It was a teaching that was recognized as part of the corpus of official Jewish teaching. So that lends it a little bit more credibility than if it was just, one person citing another person. The fact that it's a real braita, that gives it a little bit more strength. Okay,
I get it now. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions or comments? Well, all right. So let's scroll down a little more. And you're going to look here at this proof text. Okay. This is, the entire passage that was being quoted. Okay. This, again, from the book of Deuteronomy. So this is Moses' farewell speech to the Jewish people. He says, he will favor you and bless you and multiply you. He will bless the issue of your womb and the produce of your soil. In other words, there are going to be all these blessings that come to you. Your new grain and wine and oil, the calves, the lambs, all in the land that he swore to your fathers to assign to you, and you shall be blessed above all other peoples. All of your livestock will be fruitful. Okay? So that's the biblical context of this. Right? Which really, it doesn't add anything particularly. Uverach perivit necha. He will bless the issue of your belly, but it is put in masculine terms. Okay, so here's the so this is what the Breita referred to, and so it's not inherently unreasonable to cite this in relation to a ritual about a cup of blessing. Yes, Gordon.
I'm having difficulty jumping from womb to male belly.
Okay, so yes, beten can mean either one. That's this word here, the privitnecha, the fruit of your either belly or womb. But the fact is here, when it says bitnecha, that is a masculine ending. That's the point that the Breita wants us to understand. Okay?
Why then does the Torah use the term womb instead of male belly?
But the same word means both.
Well, then how did this get into the Torah, the translation of the Torah? Who
How
did
does
that?
how does anything get into the Torah, Gordon? I mean, that's a very broad question. And I'm not sure how to answer that. All we know for sure is this is the text, and the grammar of the text lends itself to the interpretation provided by the Breita. We may not like the implication of the Breita, but it's still, at least grammatically, it is a reasonable presumption from the text. Other comments? I know I didn't satisfy you, Gordon.
Well,
Sorry
you really-
about that.
You really have to understand the Hebrew.
Well, question, were the vowels there in the original, and could you have told the difference between masculine and feminine without the vowels?
Not clear. I mean, the Masoretic text established for all time and for our purposes the text, but this Breita is a pretty good indication that even before the Masoretic text was established for good in the 7th century or so, that was the tradition as to the vocalization of the text. Yes, Lou.
So this text number 5 is taken directly from Torah.
Right?
Moses is speaking to all the children of Israel.
Yes.
Could your womb refer to all the wombs of all the women?
If that were the word, probably not. Even if it were feminine, it wouldn't be, if it were feminine, it would still be a singular word. It would be, for an individual womb. So it's a blessing that's extended to the entire people of Israel, but as individuals.
It's not extended to the collective children of Israel?
it
is a collective.
it is, because the whole thing is addressed to the people of Israel, but it's being told to them in the first person singular, or the second person singular. So, you know, yeah, there's a collective element, but it's personalized for each Israelite, at least each Israelite male. Okay? Anyone else have a comment or question here?
I just want to say something.
Please, sir.
The word bitnecha, beten is belly. If he wanted to use specific womb, it's rechem. And I think many times you see that they addressed to the Am Israel as a male. Like we talked before, like you did mention, that it's addressed as a group. So it doesn't do it separately, like gender-based.
Yes.
So bitnecha, it's your belly. And
Yeah,
it's not
although here it does have the connotation of, you know, pre-vitnecha, you know, it's a reasonable presumption to think that that refers to children, the fruit of the womb, right? But you're correct. Rechem is the more common word for womb. And it doesn't use that here.
right.
So that also is a very strong support for the interpretation that Ula places on this text.
Right. Plus, at that time, the role of the woman actually was at a very high level. I'm thinking about Rabbi Akiva, how he attributed all his success to spreading Torah. He addressed it to his wife, to Bruria. So maybe that was the role of the woman at that time, even though we think it was lower, they regard, and maybe in Bavel, they put it in a higher level at that time. After all, the woman is the one who prepared, and even on the blessing on Shabbat, Nula mipri kapea, we bless the woman. So I think there's an element of actually putting the woman and Bavel on a pedestal.
Maybe. Let me just say a couple of things about what you said. First of all, Beruria is the wife of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Akiva is, yeah. But you're correct in that
Rachel, right.
Rabbi, yes, Rachel, and Rabbi Akiva pays high tribute to her, that, you know, he couldn't have, you know, possibly completed his studies without her support and assistance. And that, you know, other rabbis also paid tribute to their wives. And it was, you know, frequently in the Talmud, a man referred to his wife as his house, as if to say, I owe everything I have to her, right?
Right.
Now, that didn't mean that the woman necessarily had independent status. It just meant that the man was, was a humble enough person to recognize that, you know, all that he owed to his wife.
Right.
You know, Ulam might have said the same thing about his wife, but he doesn't see her status as an independent status. The cup of blessing goes through the husband and not necessarily directly to the wife.
Right.
So, in theory, at least you can have, high respect for a wife without necessarily granting her the kind of independent status that ultimately would solidify a person's integrity as a as someone able to function in society on their own when and if that should ever be necessary.
Right.
So I mean, which is something that is rarely questioned today,
Right.
at
But
least
he
in
was
Western society.
he was an appreciative husband.
Yes, yes. And so maybe Ula was too. We have no evidence about that, certainly not in this story. But Ula, just does not hold that the woman has independent status.
Right.
And
Well, he did not
therefore,
feel comfortable. When you think about it, he probably would not, even though it doesn't mean that Ula did not appreciate his hostess, but it was probably inappropriate for him directly to give her the cup. He had to offer it to the husband, to the host, the male host.
all right. So it seems that Rav Nachman has asked the opinion of Ula
Right.
because he doesn't want to decide the halacha for himself, at least not in the presence of another sage of, let's say, at least equal status and maybe higher status.
Right.
After all, Ula lives in the land of Israel.
Right.
So he's got at least that over Rav Nachman.
Right.
So Rav Nachman pays him the courtesy of asking him, and Ula says, no, we don't give the cup of blessing to women.
Right.
If blessing goes to women, it goes through their husbands.
Right.
End of discussion.
Right. Interesting.
In spades. So what happens next? Because this is not the end of the story, right?
Thank you.
Let's take a look. Yeah. So here we are. Ula said this, and Yalta got up. It says bezihara, which is translated here as passionately. You might say she got up in a snit. Went to the wine storehouse and broke 400 barrels of wine.
That story makes my day.
The story's not over, but okay. Yeah, you like that part of it. Now, what would you say if you were the owner of the wine barrels?
Don't mess with the Alta.
Here's your bill.
Here's your bill. Oh, yeah,
little
like
tip.
Yalta's gonna pay the bill.
Be probably a little upset.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You broke it, you own it.
Destruction of property.
Yeah, well, so here's the guy who owns the property. He might say, well, I might have sympathized with you, but look at the way you expressed your anger. You took it out on what belongs to me. Does this remind you of anything?
No.
It reminds me of Abraham smashing the idols.
Yes,
The
that's a good,
midrash
I
of
like that.
Abraham smashing the idols. And if his father, the idol maker, came to Abraham and said, why did you do this? you know, you're causing me a huge loss. You know, what does Abraham say?
I don't know. Ask the barrels of wine what they think.
Yeah, right. But the barrels of wine are just property, right?
So were the idols.
Can you think of any other incident, say maybe something more contemporary, that would resemble this action by Yalta?
Maybe what happened at the Capitol a couple weeks ago?
Not what I was going for, but you know, what makes you say that, Karen?
Well, it's kind of injuring a lot of people that, you know, had nothing to do with their frustration. And yeah, I mean, it's
Right. Right. So, you know, from their perception, the election was being stolen. And so therefore they had the right to go break every barrel of wine inside.
right.
I'm thinking of maybe Reuben and Shimon, also who went to kind of drastic action to defend their sister.
Oh, Shimon and Levi. Yes.
Shimon and Levi.
Yes. With Shechem.
Right.
The people of Shechem. Okay. So Shechem rapes their sister Dinah and then says, oh, you know, I really like her. I want her for a wife. And they say, okay, well, you know, if you and all the townspeople will be circumcised, that's, you know, great. We'll go along with that. And then after the circumcision, while they're, you know, kind of in pain and recovering from this, Shimon and Levi and all their buddies come in and slaughter the people of Shechem. Okay. And Jacob says, you know, you're really not going to make me very popular in this territory.
I think that anytime a third party is perceived as an enabler or part of a system of injustice, and they are attacked, and they don't see themselves as part of that unjust system, then they're going to feel wronged. And you can apply that dynamic to anything from Black Lives Matter to political Zionism to, I mean, like the Arabs in Palestine felt like the argument that the Jews were having with the European experience was not their problem. And they felt like they were being treated unjustly for just being there. And I can see how you could apply that same kind of logic to any kind of argument. And in this case, the owner of wine, Yalta was angry at being treated unjustly over the blessings surrounding wine. So she reached out and attacked all barrels of wine rather than the rabbis who were being unjust.
Mhm.
So I can see how in that case, the owner of the wine would feel, wait a minute, I have nothing to do with this. I'm just an innocent bystander selling wine to whoever wants to buy it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I would go along with the comparison to the Palestinians. It's not clear to me that, you know, Jews returning to Palestine was a source of injustice. May have been perceived that way, but only because Palestinian leadership pushed that narrative for their own purposes.
Yeah, I wasn't
take.
necessarily taking sides there, Rabbi. I was saying
Yeah.
that from the Palestinian perspective, there was an outside argument that had nothing to do with them.
Right.
And
But-
they were losing something because of it.
But, you know, earlier you mentioned something about Black Lives Matter. Right? Say a little more about that.
Well, I'm not sure if Black Lives Matter is the correct one, but in the 60s, there were riots in a lot of Black poor communities, particularly right after Martin Luther King was killed. And the people who were doing that riot, I'm sure some of them just wanted a free TV, but others felt like the entire system was against them. So the communities of people who were, you know, from their perception, exploiting them within their own communities, they destroyed their shops and businesses.
Yeah.
Now, we can look at that from two different perspectives, and that's really what I'm trying to say here, is that from the perspective of the wine owner, he's just selling wine. He's not participating in how it's used against women. But from the woman's perspective, all she sees is this guy supplying wine to these other people. There's a system involved that he's a part of. So I'm trying to actually articulate differences of perspective, not some kind of objective truth or objective justice.
Yeah. So let me ask this question for everyone. Why do you think she chose this destructive means of making her feelings known?
She was in a rage. She was in a rage. She didn't think it through that well.
Is this the classic murder-suicide? If I can't have him, nobody can.
Uh-huh.
And she had no.
I think we've gotten a little bit off the interpretation, and I'm glad, Rabbi, that you kind of brought us back. I think this is a discussion or an example of sexism and not general feeling of disappointment or worse. It's like, and I think she chose to destroy the wine because that's the subject that brought all this to a head. It was a blessing over the wine. And it's kind of like she destroyed the barrels and then came back up and said to the Nachman, and not only that, you're sleeping on the couch tonight.
Uh-huh.
Don't forget the doghouse.
Yeah. Right. Ronnie, were you trying to say something a moment ago? No. Okay. Yes, Gordon.
I have a question.
Does
Does it have Nachman's reaction to what she did? What was his reaction? Does it tell you that?
Well, there is a little bit more to the text. We'll see.
Okay.
All right, but we'll come to that shortly. Yes, Gordon.
In response to Lou's comment, Nachman shouldn't sleep on the couch. He wanted her to have it. He wanted her to have it directly. She should be mad at the other guy who said, no, I'm not going to let that happen.
Mm-hmm. We don't know whether Yalta is mad specifically at Ula or just plain mad, right? Not clear and maybe not that important for our purposes.
I think it's a feeling of not having not having a place to go to complain. You know, there's no.
Precisely.
There's
I agree with Karen.
Yeah,
I think she had.
Let Karen finish, okay?
Well, just that there's no place for the woman's voice, really. So what she does is not particularly productive, but she makes her point. But I think it's out of a sense of probably futility of I'm not worthy of this as a woman, and having to deal with that.
Yeah. Liz.
I was going to say, it's the policy that's, law, whatever custom that's been put into place that it's kind of that fighting back against. I think that's what a lot of people have been saying. It's not productive, if Karen says, destroying the wine, but it's that outrage that people are feeling that they don't have that control or any say into their lives.
Uh-huh. So
I think she intended to escalate.
yes. So it's hard to find a place to take that kind of outrage.
She's certainly making a statement that's heard.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So let's see what the aftermath tells us. Okay. The thrilling conclusion of our story. Rav Nachman said to him, to Ula, let the master send her another cup. Okay. In other words, like, what do you think Rav Nachman's trying to do here?
Make peace.
He's trying to make peace. Let's calm her down. Let's extend something to her. Ula sends it to her and says, all of this type can be counted as the wine of blessing. In other words, if there's, no, it's not the wine that we used for that ritual, but if it's from the same place, it conveys the blessing anyway, right? So even Ula at this point is trying to make nice. He's trying to say in a very convoluted way that, yes, this second cup that we are sending you will have the same power as the first one. Okay? And what does she say in return? She says, from itinerant peddlers come idle words, from old rags come lice. I don't think that requires too much interpretation, does it?
Stick it where the sun don't shine.
Sort of, yeah. Right. Okay, so, let me ask a slightly broader question. Why does the Talmud include this entire story?
My guess would be to show that you need to have peace in the house, and this is not the way to act at the table and dismiss the importance of wives and other women.
Okay, so that in a sense, what the Talmud is here trying to lift up the status of women in a way that some people may have been uncomfortable with. Right? Any other suggestions?
I was just going to say I agreed to make peace and to bring peace to the home. I'm not sure I would go so far as to say raising their status. I don't know that was really, that one I'm not sure on.
Yeah, and in fact, it may be that it's not recommending to raise the status of women, that it's simply including the story as an acknowledgement of a disagreement that happens to be in the Talmud. And disagreements in the Talmud are, they happen all the time. How do we deal with those disagreements?
Mhm.
Yes, Ronnie.
I'm still bothered by the fact that she went to the wine warehouse and destroyed all the bottles. I think that was very counterproductive in trying to prove her point.
Mm-hmm.
If she wants to have her status elevated, she needs to learn, self-restraint. She needs to learn how to argue her point And I think destroying the bottles was very counterproductive to what she was trying to achieve.
Uh-huh. Okay. Thank you, Ronnie, because you put it very well. Now, let me give the counter argument to that, which is you sound like, the white moderate in the civil rights movement, right? Yes, your cause is just, but the way you're trying to bring it about, you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, Liz.
So, we don't know if this event actually really happened, but saying it's trying to show a point, is it a way of, I don't know, kind of demeaning women and saying that women didn't have the restraint, they will act out in a way that's maybe not appropriate to show, I'm sorry, Ronnie?
Irrationally.
Irrationally, which women have been thought about for a long time. They don't have that control. They don't think logically. They just go from emotion. And I don't know. So
yeah, maybe, but my sense, Liz, is that the rabbis did not generally make up this kind of story. If they told a story about specific individuals who were sages with each other, an incident like this, I mean, it's like about, I would say to you, you can't make this stuff up. And they probably didn't. All right, Jerry, and then we're going to close up.
Okay, I have I don't know if it fits, but there's that saying that anger is idol worship. And I see that she was supposed to be a learned person and all that.
Yes.
And all of a sudden she pulls that on them.
Yes.
And that bothers me.
Yeah, well, but it goes to show that even people who are intelligent, civilized in general, certainly more knowledgeable than the average woman, more powerful than the average woman in her time.
It just supports the stereotype, like Liz said, that a woman cannot control her emotions. And I think that really, I think it's that stereotype that really bothers me.
Okay, but, I think the Talmud includes this as a way of expressing the problem on both sides. Where do you go when you have such an injustice? Either you can be the good girl and, protest verbally to the rabbis, or you can, go to the wine cellar and say, if I can't have blessing, nobody else will either.
And I think that
we're going to have to stop here. Those of you who are coming to my mysticism class, we'll get together in about 6 minutes. Thank you all very much. And we'll carry on into the next unit next Sunday.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good class.
Yep.
Thank
See you
you.
later.
Okay,